Hello and welcome to our brand new show, Firstpost Spotlight, where we bring you stories that matter to you from all across the world. From breaking news to the day's biggest controversies, we shed light on issues that shape our world. I'm Alison LaGrange, live from Durban, South Africa. Let's begin with the top headlines. US President Joe Biden delivers his farewell address ahead of inauguration of President-elect Donald Trump. Biden warns over emerging oligarchy threatening democracy in America. The United Kingdom says it will put the Chagos deal with Mauritius on hold until Trump takes office. London to hold consultations with the new US president. South Korea's arrested President Yoon Suk-yeol refuses to cooperate during questioning, further stonewalling a criminal probe into insurrection after his martial law bid. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif orders an investigation into the country's national airline after it released an advert that drew accusations of evoking imagery of the 9/11 attacks. And Blue Origin's giant New Glenn rocket blasts off from Florida and enters into Earth's orbit on its first mission to space, marking an inaugural step for Jeff Bezos' space company. Hello and welcome. We begin with the latest on the war raging in the heart of Europe between Russia and Ukraine, which is close to entering its fourth year. Loud blasts and air raid sirens rang out in Kiev earlier today as Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer made a surprise visit to the Ukrainian capital. Kiev officials said that air defense systems in the center of the city were engaging enemy targets. Ukraine claimed its forces repelled a major Russian drone attack. The UK leader signed what Downing Street calls a landmark 100-year partnership with Ukraine. The new deal formalizes Britain's economic and military support already pledged to Ukraine. The UK Prime Minister hailed closer than ever partnership with Ukraine.
My seventh meeting with President Zelensky. I'm here at the burns unit of one of the Kiev hospitals, which is a grim reminder of the heavy price that Ukraine is paying here. So we must put in the necessary support. So that's what I'm discussing with President Zelensky today. We must never let up on that, and we've been leading the way. At the same time, we're signing a 100-year partnership between UK and Ukraine. This is a real statement of our intent for the long term in relation to our commitment to Ukraine.
A series of attacks in recent months have intensified the long bombing campaign by both Russia and Ukraine, and they come at a precarious moment of the war. There has been an escalation in major drone and missile strikes. This is because both Russia and Ukraine are seeking to gain advantage as US President-elect Donald Trump's inauguration nears. The incoming US president has pledged to bring a quick end to the fighting. This has been his biggest foreign policy promise. While Trump promised to strike a peace deal on his first day at the White House, he has not yet revealed the details of this plan.
We are waiting for the U.S. president's inauguration. I think the whole world is waiting because the United States is a strategic partner in global stability. They are the main donors supporting Ukraine in its war for survival against Russian aggression. We expect continued support for Ukraine. Our teams are already working on the location and format of the future meeting with Donald Trump, where key issues will be discussed. I will not go into detail here, but you know the main issue for us. We want to end this war now, but with a just peace. For that, we need guarantees that Russia will not return to Ukraine with war.
Trump's team have already said that both sides will have to make concessions in order to reach the peace deal.
It's going to require bold diplomacy, and my hope is that it could begin with some ceasefire, and we're going to have, in order to achieve objectives like the one that needs to occur in Ukraine, it is important for everyone to be realistic. There will have to be concessions made by the Russian Federation, but also by the Ukrainians, and the United States has lent itself there. It's also important that there be some balance on both sides.
However, Moscow has already rejected the idea that it might be willing to concede any occupied territory to Ukraine. During his presidential election campaign, Donald Trump had even threatened to cut U.S. aid to Ukraine. Fearing this, Kiev is already shoring up support among America's European allies. On Wednesday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky visited Poland, where he met with both President Andrzej Duda and the Prime Minister Donald Tusk. Poland reaffirmed unconditional support for Ukraine. Zelensky also asked the West to use around $250 billion of unallocated frozen Russian assets to buy Kiev more weapons.
The strongest support for the Ukrainian army is to allocate the $250 billion. Ukraine will take this money, allocate a large amount for domestic production, and for the import of exactly those types of weapons that Ukraine does not have, where there is a deficit.
While Zelensky met allies to shore up support, Russia launched a wave of missiles and drones at gas and energy facilities across Ukraine. On Wednesday, Moscow said its forces carried out high-precision strikes on facilities supporting Ukraine's military-industrial complex. The Ukrainian Air Force said that Russia launched 43 cruise and ballistic missiles, as well as 74 attack drones, which targeted sites mainly in western Ukraine. Ukraine says it had shot down 30 of the missiles and 47 drones, while Russia claims all designated targets had been struck. Ukraine's prime minister said that the Russian attack had failed. Condemning the Russian strikes, the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, called on his allies to provide more robust security assistance. The Russian bombardment came just a day after Kiev claimed to have carried out its largest aerial attack of the war on Russian army factories and energy hubs, hundreds of kilometers from the front line. Kiev's forces launched more than 140 drones, US-made long-range missiles known as ATACMS, and the UK's Storm Shadow missiles. Now, blasts were reported in the border region of Bryansk, and drones targeted Saratov and Tula in western Russia. The outgoing US President Joe Biden gave the green light for Ukraine to use American long-range missiles to strike inside Russia. Moscow sees this as a major escalation and had warned that the use of the ATACMS could be met with firing of Russia's new hypersonic ballistic missile. Now, with Biden leaving the Oval Office and Trump taking over, the incoming president has said that a meeting with Putin was being arranged. Russia, too, has welcomed direct talks between the President Putin and President Trump. Direct talks between the American and Russian presidents would represent a significant change of approach. So far, since the beginning of the conflict, the Biden administration has shunned high-level talks with Moscow. But in recent days, Trump seems to have walked back on his rhetoric. From promises to end the war, Trump later said that he would solve the conflict. He even said that ending the war in Ukraine will be harder than a ceasefire in Gaza. While Israel and Hamas have now reached a ceasefire for 6 weeks, will Trump be able to stick to his 24-hour promise on ending the Ukraine war? And speaking of Israel-Hamas war, after over 15 months of brutal war in Gaza that has killed over 46,000 people, mediator Qatar says that Israel and Hamas have reached a ceasefire and hostage deal. The deal outlines a 6-week initial ceasefire phase starting on the 19th of January. Under the deal, the Israeli forces will withdraw from Gaza but will remain positioned on its borders to allow the hostage prisoner swap. 33 hostages will be released in the first stage of this deal, in exchange for about 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. Humanitarian aid will flow in with 600 trucks entering Gaza daily, including 50 carrying much-needed fuel to restore electricity. Israel has also agreed to let Palestinian civilians return to northern Gaza through the Rafah crossing with Egypt. Now, the negotiations for a second phase would commence on the 16th day after the implementation of the first phase. The draft states that the second phase would begin only if the first phase remains successful. This is expected to take place from the 3rd of February. The second phase is expected to see a full withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza and Hamas releasing the remaining surviving hostages in return for more Palestinian prisoners. The third phase would cover the release of the remaining captives, including the male soldiers and mortal remains in the hostages killed in Gaza. And talks on a multi-year Gaza reconstruction plan are also expected in this phase. More details of the second and third phases will be finalized during the implementation of phase 1. However, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office blamed Hamas for attempting to extort last-minute concessions in the deal. The statement added that Netanyahu's cabinet will not meet until Hamas accepts all elements of the agreement. Meanwhile, world leaders have welcomed the announcement of the truce agreement. In the United States, President Joe Biden, as well as the President-elect Donald Trump, claimed credit for the ceasefire deal. In his farewell address, President Joe Biden said that the ceasefire deal was negotiated by his team and will be implemented by the incoming Trump administration.
After 8 months of nonstop negotiation, my administration, a ceasefire and a hostage deal has been reached by Israel and Hamas, the elements of which I laid out in great detail in May of this year. This plan was developed and negotiated by my team and will be largely implemented by the incoming administration.
Incoming U.S. President Donald Trump vowed to work closely with Israel and said that he will not allow Gaza to become a terrorist safe haven. Iran's supreme leader, who is accused of intensifying proxy war against Israel in support of Palestinians, described the ceasefire deal as Israel's defeat. Now, welcoming the deal, Turkey said that the agreement will be beneficial not just for the West Asia, but for all of humanity. Saudi Arabia called for the need to adhere to the ceasefire agreement and end the Israeli aggression on Gaza. Both Egypt and Jordan called on world leaders to ensure sufficient and durable delivery of aid to Gaza. Meanwhile, the Indian government hoped that the ceasefire will lead to safe and sustained supply of humanitarian assistance in Gaza. Elsewhere, French President Emmanuel Macron called for a political solution to the Israel-Palestine conflict, and European Union called the ceasefire deal as a stepping stone toward lasting stability in the region. China also welcomed the ceasefire deal and expressed hope for a comprehensive and permanent ceasefire. The United Nations also called the ceasefire agreement the critical first step for peace in the region. Now, even as the ceasefire deal was announced in the Israeli attacks on Gaza continued today, at least 4 people were reported dead in a recent Israeli strike on Gaza City. The situation in Gaza remains a mix of cautious relief, hope, and simmering grief after 15 months of ground-leveling devastation. As per Gaza's health ministry, the Israeli offensive in Gaza has killed over 46,000 people so far. Meanwhile, in Israel, the wounds of the 7th of October attack that killed about 1,200 people still remain fresh. Families of Israelis held captive by Hamas also live with persistent grief. The war has created one of the deadliest humanitarian crises of current times, especially in Gaza. The stakes for the success of this ceasefire agreement could not be higher, with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu blaming Hamas for extorting last-minute concessions. The question remains, will this much-needed ceasefire begin on the 19th of January, or will it be pushed even further? And moving on, India has now joined an elite club of spacefaring nations capable of docking satellites in their orbit. The Indian Space Research Organization has achieved this historic milestone with their space docking experiment, or the SpaceX mission. Under the complex procedure, 2 satellites named Chaser and Target were successfully docked or joined together in space. With this, India has become only the fourth nation in the world after the US, Russia and China to achieve the space docking milestone. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi took to social media to congratulate the Indian space scientists. Prime Minister Modi called the space docking a significant stepping stone for India's ambitious space missions in the years to come. But what exactly is space docking, and how will it become a stepping stone for India's future space missions? Now imagine trying to connect two cars speeding down a highway just in a way that they avoid a crash. Now replace the speeding cars on the road with speeding satellites in space. Now that's essentially what satellite docking is, but with much higher speed and stakes. It involves bringing two spacecraft traveling at thousands of kilometers per hour into close proximity and then joining them together. Needless to say, the space docking requires incredible accuracy and control. For India, the successful space docking experiment has paved the path toward more complex space missions. The docking experiment is critical to India's ambition to build its own space station by the year 2035. And that's because a space station cannot be launched in one go. Different modules are sent up separately and then docked together in orbit. Docking, therefore, is most crucial for the construction of the planned Indian space station, the Bharatiya Antariksha Station. Now, India also aims to send its own crew to the moon by the year 2040. For the missions to the moon and beyond, docking will allow for the assembly of spacecraft in space, as well as the transfer of crew and cargo. India's space ambitions have accelerated in recent years under Prime Minister Narendra Modi. In 2023, India landed a spacecraft on the moon under its Chandrayaan-3 mission. With that, India became the first in the world to land near the moon's unexplored South Pole. In 2026, India is scheduled to send astronauts to space under its ambitious Gangayaan mission. India is also scheduled to launch its first orbital mission to Venus in 2028. India has targeted the year 2035 to build its own space station named the Bharatiya Space Station. In 2040, the country plans to send a crewed mission to the moon. The euphoria over India's successful space programs in recent time has resonated not just in India but across the global south. The excitement was most visible in August of 2023 when the success of India's Chandrayaan-3 mission coincided with the BRICS summit. Leaders of the BRICS bloc, including the host South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa, had joined India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi to celebrate Chandrayaan's success. Time and again, India has repeated the need of using developments in space sciences for humanity's perusal. Even as a race to build weaponry for a space war intensifies across the world, India continues to hold a critical lesson of human welfare through futuristic space missions. Indian actor Saif Ali Khan narrowly escaped a life-threatening incident early on Thursday morning. An intruder broke into his house in the Mumbai city Bandra suburbs and stabbed him multiple times during a scuffle. Now, the incident unfolded at approximately 2:30 in the morning when the intruder, allegedly attempting a burglary, entered Khan's 11th floor apartment, reportedly using a fire escape. The police reported that the intruder had a confrontation with Khan's house helper before the actor intervened. Now, upon confronting the intruder, a violent altercation ensued. During this, Khan sustained 6 stab wounds, including an injury near his spine. The attacker fled the scene before the authorities arrived. The police say that the incident appeared to be a robbery attempt. Now, the actor was rushed to the Lilavati Hospital, where a team of neurosurgeons performed critical surgery. According to the hospital, a foreign object, a broken part of the knife, was lodged near the actor's thoracic spinal cord, and this caused his spinal fluid to leak. In addition to the spinal injury, Khan also suffered deep wounds to his left wrist and neck. They were repaired by a cosmetic surgeon later. Khan now remains under observation in the intensive care unit, and the doctors say that he is stable and out of danger. Saif Ali Khan's wife and actor Kareena Kapoor and their 2 young children were unharmed during the incident. Kapoor's team assured fans of their safety and thanked the police and the medical staff. The Bandra police, along with the Mumbai crime branch, have launched a thorough investigation into the attack. Sniffer dogs were deployed at the scene and forensic experts collected fingerprints and other evidence. They are also reviewing the CCTV footage from the building and the nearby areas. Authorities suspect that the attacker entered Khan's home with the help of an insider. According to police, one of Khan's house helpers knew the attacker and gave him entry into the house. 3 attendants who work at Saif Ali Khan's house are now being interrogated by the police. Officials say, and I quote, "The attacker scaled a wall from an adjacent building to gain access. We have identified a suspect and are pursuing leads." While Khan's recovery brings relief, the incident has raised serious questions about security in one of Mumbai's most upscale neighborhoods. Police have deployed 15 special teams to track down the assailant. 3 teams in Mumbai are now on the lookout for the suspect, while 1 special team will be sent out of Mumbai. For now, Saif Ali Khan is stable and on the path to recovery. But the chilling attack serves as a stark reminder of the vulnerability faced even by public figures in the confines of their own homes. And that's all we have on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to Firstpost.
From breaking news to the day's biggest controversies, shedding light on the world's top headlines, detailed analysis on the stories that matter the most to you. Catch it all on Spotlight at 6 p.m. India time and 12:30 GMT, only on Firstpost.